Hello, my friends. Andrew Kornfeld here from Systema Health. I'm enjoying an incredible matcha today. And in today's video, I am going to talk to you about diet and inflammatory bowel disease. As you know, I have Crohn's disease. I've been in remission for over 10 years with this condition, and obviously diet has been an enormous part of how I have done this. This video is going to be probably the least dogmatic, I think the most science-based. Probably, again, I do have opinions on this, but this is not going to come from the perspective of a dietitian or nutritionist or gastroenterologist or even an integrative doctor. It's going to come from the perspective of a real patient, a patient expert, someone who's looked at the science, and someone who works with these individuals every single day. And I would say that anyone who tells you that they have the answer, that they know exactly the right thing to do for inflammatory bowel disease, the ultimate diet, etc., I would just run, because there is no one perfect diet. And if someone says you can only eat plants, or you can only eat fruit, or you can only eat meat, or you have to take these things out and this is the way to go, I would say that's probably not the diet for you, because these people are not willing to help to individualize the diet to you. And if I have found anything in inflammatory bowel disease and working with so many people with different chronic health conditions, but again, hundreds of people with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, microscopic colitis, and indeterminate colitis, it's that there is no one diet. Okay, there are patterns, and we're going to go through that, and we're going to go through the scientific mechanism of why some of these diets work. We're going to go over the common diets that are involved. I'm going to show you guys some incredible resources. I'm going to go into depth about my personal diet. We are going to go through everything. So let's buckle up, let's take a deep dive together, and I am excited to explore diet and inflammatory bowel disease. Let's go. All right, so here we go. I think we're going to first start here with the mechanism of inflammatory bowel disease. And overall, the structure of this video, we're going to be going through a lot of resources. We're going to talk about different aspects of it. There's going to be personal shares. There's going to be a lot in this video for sure. And I'm also going to go through some recent studies, and we're going to examine them together. I'm really, really excited. I want to be with you on this journey here, and let's dive in. So the first thing for us to remember is that inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, indeterminate, and microscopic colitis is likely a disease of the microbiome. It is the immune system overreacting to bacterial organisms or possibly food particles as well, especially in the colon and that area, in ulcerative colitis or Crohn's colitis. And that is what's causing the inflammation. So this is what I call the IBD pathogenesis feedback loop. We have bacterial leakage here. We have an inflammatory cascade and barrier damage. And how do we know, real quick, that this is bacterial in nature? It's because there have been studies with germ-free mice, okay? And these are mice that are raised in a sterile environment, and they do not have microbiomes. Yes, it is possible to live without a microbiome. These are completely sterile mice, and they have all sorts of problems. They have behavioral problems, they likely have hormonal problems, etc. However, they do not get inflammatory bowel disease. There are certain chemicals that you can give to mice and rats, and you will induce IBD. You will cause barrier damage, and in them you'll start to see very similar models to ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease in mice. And in these situations, these germ-free mice do not get inflammatory bowel disease. So thus, we do assume that it is, and there have been other studies also that have basically confirmed that the immune system is overreacting to the microbiome, to certain aspects. So again, the thinking is if we control the microbiome and if we change the microbiome, we can actually change how the immune system is responding. And that's why diet is really, really important in IBD, okay? And guess what? The most readily available way to alter the microbiome is through diet. And especially complex carbohydrates, whether it be fiber, whether it be starches, and we're going to go into that, or not eating at all. All of these things change the microbiome, and we are at the very beginning, the very cusp of understanding all of the microorganisms that are part of the microbiome. But here's the mechanism of inflammatory bowel disease. We have bacterial leakage, we have an inflammatory cascade, and we have barrier damage, and this just goes around in a circular-like fashion here, and that is why flares are so intense. Okay, and here's just a small schematic of the different players that are involved. These are different cytokines. These are different interleukin factors. These are the things that are, specifically targeted. Obviously, there's more to the bacterial leakage and barrier damage, but this is the inflammatory cascade that the immune system is going through. And let's just back up for 1 sec and just remember that the gut has a very important job. It has to allow all of the foods that come into, all of the foods that give us nutrients, all of the caloric aspects of our diet, fats, carbohydrates, proteins, micronutrients, and then it has to sort out what is going to give us nourishment and differentiate between what, frankly, could kill us. And so that's why the gut has a very, very intense job. And there's an intricate immune system that is in the gut, just like there's an intricate nervous system that's in the gut called the enteric nervous system as well. And that's why all of this is related. And just, not to totally overwhelm you here, but this is just a quick schematic of all the different things in inflammatory bowel disease. Not all of them, actually, just a small slice of them that impact this inflammatory cascade that in fact affect barrier damage. You can see there are lots of food items here. We see my matcha that's literally sitting right there, okay, and bone broth and prebiotic fibers and probiotic foods and all of these things. So I want to, now that we've gone through the mechanism of IBD, I want to give you a little inside look into our general view of diet at Systema. And now this applies to literally all chronic health conditions. We're going to go through the 4 dietary principles, and we're just going to go through some basic, I just want to dive in. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of what all the diets are called and all of that first. I want to just deliver value literally right now to you. So if you're listening to this video, you could literally just watch the first half and get a lot of, or even the first quarter here and get a lot of value before we go into the deeper dive. So here is lesson 2.4.1 of Systema Core. Systema Core is our foundational program. It's applicable to people with a myriad of different lifestyle-related chronic health conditions. We have 4 different domains that are applied here. These are things like immune inflammation, gut microbiome, lifestyle metabolism, and brain and mindset. And there's many different conditions that this specific lesson applies to, and you can go on to school and join the foundational program, Systema Core, okay, if you want to experience this. And we also, like I said, have a specific program called Systema IBD, which is a more intensive hands-on program for people specifically diagnosed with IBD, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, microscopic colitis, indeterminate colitis. So this one is called, this is in the module Feeling Better Now, the foundations and just immediate dietary interventions. So let's just back up and let's go through the 4 dietary and nutritional principles of Systema. And these are the things I want you to think about as we go through this. And this is a plate of my food that I was eating recently. You can see 3 beautiful farm fresh eggs right here. You can see some, this is, I believe, fresh venison that I had. This is some probiotic beets. These are the supplements and herbs that I'm taking. You can see prebiotics and probiotics. This is some kefir with some honey on it. There's a lot of different parts of this: avocados and olives and apples and kiwis and strawberries and pineapple and mango. This is a lot of what my diet looks like, right here. But I also, from time to time, I'm not hard on myself. I go explore. Sometimes I eat something that's not perfectly on my diet. I'd say I follow a diet that's pretty heavy in fruits. It's pretty heavy in whole. It's very, very dominated by whole foods. I eat a good amount of animal products. I eat organ meats. I eat a fair amount of fermented foods, probably not enough. I think I need a little bit more of that lately. Sometimes I forget, but this is a good encapsulation of what I eat. So here's our first principle. The first is to eat real, nutrient-dense whole foods and avoid processed and artificial ingredients. This is so obvious, but it just needs to be stated over and over again. you would be surprised about the amount of foods that we put in our bodies every single day that are processed that we actually think are fine. And one tip is to think about being the outside of the grocery store often has more fresh foods. And in terms of buying organic versus not buying organic, I think it's slightly less of a big deal than you think. But if you can buy organic produce and you can afford it, go for it, okay? The second nutritional principle, your diet is completely unique and every diet is different. Only you will be able to determine your full diet that fits your unique biology, your unique needs and desires. I don't think I need to say anything more about this. We are unique human beings. Yes, we share 99 point, put a number there. I don't remember exactly what it is, probably 99.7 or something like that, of our DNA with our fellow human beings. However, that small difference, both in our genetic profiles, in our epigenetic profiles, in our lifestyle, in the location we are at, in what we want, it requires different dietary interventions. And that's probably the number one thing you're going to get out of this video, is that there's no one approach to this. Your mental health, here's the third principle, okay? Your mental health and well-being around food and eating is just as important as the diet you are following, okay? It is so easy for people to go down the road of over-restriction, sometimes eating disorders. Look, sometimes you're hungry and you just got to eat what you do. Sometimes you mess up. Sometimes you eat something that you shouldn't have. Other times you're just out with your friends. Maybe you go out and drink a beer or something like that, and that's not something that's really good for you. People with Crohn's disease often have antibodies against yeast or are gluten-free, or the aspect of alcohol is very difficult. Or sometimes you just want to go eat a nice, nutritious gourmet piece of pizza or something like that. Or heaven forbid, sometimes maybe you just go out and eat some fast food. Do not beat yourself up. Be kind to yourself. Be loving for yourself. Tomorrow is a new day to, get back on the dietary protocol. So we never shame anyone. We don't even use the word cheating. Sometimes, people will use that commonly. We like to just call it exploring. And certainly there are times that I go explore. I don't eat fast food, but there are times where, I explore and eat some delicious whole types of foods that are generally not, on my normal day-to-day diet. Okay. 4, you must go through a strategic process to design and test your own diet to truly determine what you do and don't eat in the context of your current state of health. Okay. And this is what we call the adaptive dietary framework in Systema Health. And this is where there are 3 different phases. There's a foundational phase, a stability phase, an exploratory phase. I think, this is what people with chronic health conditions do, that every day is a little bit different. And there are different things that I can tolerate more or less on certain days, on certain weeks, depending on the state of my inflammation, the state of my microbiome, my mindset around it, what I really truly want that day. So again, this is a dynamic process, and that's really, really important to remember. So these next slides, I'm going to go through them very fast. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because this is just a general overview. I'm going to show you them. I'm going to give you a sneak peek into these. You're welcome to pause the video and read the text on the slides. There's a lot of text on these slides coming up, but these are just some general overviews of different foods in Systema, and I think they'll be really helpful for you. Okay? So let's just go ahead and define our peace out foods. Let's just say goodbye to these, okay? Here they are. There is no nutritional benefit to trans fat, artificial ingredients, and seed oils. In many cases, they cause harm. Here they are. Trans fat and ultra-processed foods. These are things like creamer, margarine, drinks, baked goods, special, not all baked goods, but specifically ones with trans fat in them, refrigerator dough, fry foods, snacks. Next one is vegetable and seed oils right here. There are healthier alternatives here, things like olive oil, coconut oil, avocado, ghee. Look, a little bit of seed oil, a little bit of vegetable oil, is it going to kill you? No. If you mess up a little bit, not a problem, especially if you take a little extra antioxidants. There's some different anti-inflammatories. Eating a good amount of anthocyanins, flavonoids, polyphenols could probably offset any seed oils that you ingest a little bit. And then we have things like binders, additives, stabilizers, artificial sweeteners. I mean, you can see all of these things. These are not food, okay? And they should not be in our food supply, period. So let's go through just quickly our maybe foods. These are things like gluten and dairy. Some people can tolerate these things great. It depends on which gluten and dairy you're tolerating. Refined carbohydrates. Again, what I mean by this is like starches mainly. Some people do great with these, other people do not. Especially in inflammatory bowel disease, carbohydrates are a huge deal. Some people tolerate them fine, some people don't. And again, fiber is also a carbohydrate. It's also a prebiotic. So again, carbohydrates are probably the number one food that feed, that nourish, or actually feed inflammatory bacteria in inflammatory bowel disease. So we're going to discuss quite a bit about carbohydrates. And I would say natural alternatives, sweeteners, I would just say these are probably fine in small amounts, but generally these are not things that our ancestors were consuming. I call these the send it foods right here. We have some definitions right here. Again, if you want full access to this in the full lecture, you can join Systema Health Core. Dark fruits and berries, incredibly packed with flavonoids and anthocyanins. More of those, okay, if you can tolerate them. And if in inflammatory bowel disease, it's important to blend these things. Nutrient-dense animal products. Look, some of you are plant-based, and I think that you can do it. Generally, what I notice, and this is just an observation, is that people who are only eating animals when they come in and they're carnivore, and we introduce fruits and some other carbohydrates and vegetables into their diet, they generally do a little bit better. And people who are completely plant-based and we introduce some level of animal products into their diet, they also do a lot better. Now look, that does not mean you need to do that. And I have helped many people who are plant-based to thrive with inflammatory bowel disease, and it can be done. So just keep that in mind. All right, nutrient-dense herbs and spices. These are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the face of the planet. Fermented foods, these are things like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, miso. I would say that this is a double-edged sword in inflammatory bowel disease right here. I'd proceed with caution, okay? I'd proceed with caution. And also, if you're feeling good, especially if you're in more of a state of remission, you're feeling better, you could really go a little bit harder on the fermented foods. But sometimes when I'm in an active flare, too many fermented foods can actually make things worse. Tropical fruits, these are full of really, really good prebiotics, especially, these things contain this kind of like almost mucilaginous. Think of like things like papaya, things like mango. I would say like citrus fruits can often be a little bit more difficult. People with inflammatory bowel disease. Leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables. I'd cook these things really hard. I wouldn't eat these things in active flares. You want to make sure that like you are, again, I just want to remind you, I'm giving general experience, general advice. Everyone could be different. I would say there are very few individuals with inflammatory bowel disease who would be in an active flare who would eat raw broccoli. Let's just say that, okay? We're going to continue here. Root vegetables, cooked carrots, onions, these types of things. If you're sensitive to FODMAPs, obviously an onion is a FODMAP, so that's a consideration. I think cooked carrots, things like that are pretty helpful in an active flare of Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. Healthy fats, we just went through this already. Healthy sweeteners. There's a lot of opinions on sugar, okay? Personally, I think that sugar is an important part of my diet, especially when it's in the form of honey or dates or coconut sugar. And also, if I have eaten a good amount of sugar and I'm feeling like a little off, it's important for me to go take a walk. or something, get a little bit of exercise, go surfing, go on a run, lift some weights, actually to use that sugar. Vegetables that are actually fruits. I love this. These are things like tomatoes, bell peppers, squash, pumpkins. I'd say these are some of the most powerful foods in IBD. Not so much necessarily tomatoes, but things like zucchini and squash. This is where you can get sort of starchy vegetables and not, get the type of specific carbohydrates that might feed inflammatory bacteria. For example, squash and zucchini are allowed on SCD. And we're going to go through the specific carbohydrate diet and what that is and all of that in a second. Mushrooms, they have a lot of benefits. There's actually been studies with specific types of mushrooms in inflammatory bowel disease. I would just say, again, they contain, I believe, chitin, and it could be pretty rough if you're in a flare. So I definitely cook these, blend these, probably not consume in an active flare. Starches and whole grains. We're going to go through a lot about starches. I think in some situations they can be really important in inflammatory bowel disease, and other times they can be inflammatory. Again, because of how they are modulating, feeding potentially more inflammatory microbes in the microbiome. Legumes, again, sort of, a food that could be, again, contains fiber, an important important prebiotic, but also might contain certain starches, might promote gas in certain individuals, especially who are more prone to IBS. So again, that's why we have the in moderation here. And then nuts and seeds. If you're in an active flare, I'd be really careful with nuts and seeds. I personally do not feel that great. It doesn't necessarily activate my Crohn's disease when I eat a ton of nuts and seeds, but there are people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, especially those who follow a more SCD-like diet, who eat a lot of nuts and seeds. And we're going to just speed through some important dietary considerations. And again, if this is going too fast for you, go join Systema Core. You will get a much more in-depth overview of all of this, and we'll work with you as well. Okay, or again, even better, if you have inflammatory bowel disease, join Systema IBD, and we'll go through this even further with you and help to tailor this to you, okay? So think about eating patterns and timing. Sometimes it's not just about what you eat, but how and when you're eating. Think about intermittent fasting, the meal frequency and size, the optimal eating window, all of that. I'll talk a little bit more probably about what I do personally. I'll just say real quick, I generally skip dinner a lot of the time, maybe half the time, and that helps me. A lot of the time we do a lot of our digesting while we're sleeping, and that's not the optimal time to be digesting huge amounts of food, is when we're sleeping. And the best time is when we're more active during the day, when we're standing upright. Navigating the grocery store, we talked about this. Generally, just rule of thumb, kind of stay on the outside of the grocery store. That's important. Identifying your food triggers. This is, how you are able to see what is triggering for you, what's not, and also keep in mind that a certain food trigger might trigger you right away. And if it triggers you right away, that's probably more of an immune system issue. If it takes a while, that might be more of a microbiome type of issue. And I wouldn't be here, you got to drink good water. Drink filtered water. I can't emphasize that enough. It's really, really important. If you have access to a reverse osmosis filter, that's ideal. And adaptive eating, this is the process that we would go through together. If you decide to coach with me, or you enroll in Systema IBD or Systema Core, that we go through a foundational phase, a stability phase, an exploratory phase of the adaptive dietary framework. All right, moving on. All right, let's go through some of the dietary interventions for IBD. There's going to be a lot of acronyms, a lot of names. I don't want you to get overwhelmed here, but oftentimes what we do in the adaptive dietary framework is we start with a foundational dietary strategy, and this is what I would help you do in this. We start with a foundational dietary strategy in your foundational phase, and then we use these diets in our framework to move into a stability phase and eventually an exploratory phase, which you all want to be in the exploratory phase. For me personally, sometimes I'm in the stability phase and the exploratory phase mainly. And, if I am having a minor flare or something like that, remember, remission does not mean perfection. I have not had a flare that's lasted for more than a week. And maybe I've had just 1 or 2 of those or 3 of those in the last year. I've only had, symptoms that last usually a couple days. I'm able to get it under control. I'd say 3 common diets to think of, and one thing that's missing from here is the Mediterranean diet, which is a big deal, which we're gonna, which seems to be favored by gastroenterologists right now, is the specific carbohydrate diet, the IBD anti-inflammatory diet, also called IBD aid, and the autoimmune protocol. And there's also the Crohn's disease exclusion diet that we can bring up. So those are 2 other. And this is currently on the IBD Coach website, soon to be systema.health. So it'll be at systema.health/IBD treatments. And it's just a very comprehensive blog post. So basically, the specific carbohydrate diet limits, just if we had to just sum it up, and I want to keep it very simple, no starches. That's basically it. It's like no rice, no bread, no gluten, no pasta, no grains, no potatoes, no sweet potatoes, and again, the types of legumes are also highly restricted. Like in some cases, lentils are allowed on it. IBD aid takes maybe a little bit of a more modern view, and there are different phases to IBD aid as well. There's like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, similar to our dietary strategy, except they give you actual lists. The deal with IBD aid is that sweet potatoes and oats are allowed, even in the sort of more in the earlier phases. And I think this kind of, for a lot of people with inflammatory bowel disease, this might be a little premature to introduce these things, but this is a great dietary strategy to start with. It's put out by the University of Massachusetts. It really, in some ways, incorporates our enhanced understanding of the microbiome. Like when SCD was put forward, many decades ago, we didn't really understand the microbiome. We didn't understand that there were good microbes that needed to be fed by different prebiotics. And there's more of a focus on the prebiotics in the IBD anti-inflammatory diet. The autoimmune protocol is also, it might go a little bit too far for some people. Like it limits things like nightshade vegetables, which could be an important part for certain people with inflammatory bowel disease. And we'll go through, let's go take a slightly deeper dive here into these. And I want to show you this incredible resource called Nutritional Therapy for IBD. I know the individuals who have created this. They are superstars in the IBD world. I have so much respect for them. So thank you for everything that you're doing. They are a nonprofit. They are always at the different Crohn's and colitis congresses, and they're always presented there. I mean, obviously, they're not given as prominent of a spot as the drug companies are, but they're there, and we appreciate them a lot. So let me just show you. If you click on dietary options, and then you go the dietary comparison, I think this is pretty comprehensive. We're not going to go through all of this, but this compares SCD, it compares IBD aid, it compares AIP, it contains the Crohn's disease exclusion diet, and it really breaks it down, all of the things that are allowed, all of the things that are not. SCD just means modified SCD. Okay. And again, in my opinion, I'm on a modified SCD diet because I modify it every day a little bit. There are some days that I can tolerate a little bit of sourdough bread, a little bit of potatoes, even. There are even days that I can, like I said, enjoy a rare croissant or something like that, as long as I'm incorporating a lot of other lifestyle interventions right there. So I just wanted to show you this. It generally, like, if you're on one of these diets and you're like, hey, I have a question about what I can and cannot eat, that would be important here. I want to show you, I think right now, I'm going to show you an inside look into my remission master plan. This is it still has the IBD coach branding on it. It'll be updated. I want to show you a little bit about what I'm eating. This is not fully up to date, but it's still pretty close and what it would look like. And this is what also I would help you construct and build when you coach with me. So this is my remission master plan. This is the IBD ADF, the IBD Adaptive Dietary Framework. We also use the Adaptive Dietary Framework for all other conditions now. So, we started with IBD Coach. That's what we did. We're evolving into Systema Health, which is applying all of these incredible principles we did with IBD to a myriad of other chronic health conditions. But here's an overview. This is 4 years ago, but my diet is pretty similar, and I'll tell you all the things that I see. In short, I have Michael Pollan's approach: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I no longer fully agree with this. I think it is true that I eat mostly plants. That's just like probably 75% of my plate is mostly plants, but there are some people that need to eat mostly animals. And I probably wouldn't incorporate that anymore. Whole foods, avoid artificial processed foods, stabilizers, binders, preservatives. Yes, restricted eating. I don't like that term, restricted eating, but it is what it is. There are certain times and quantities, like sometimes I find that it's better for me to eat 2 meals per day. And generally, if I do skip a meal, the best meal for me to skip is dinner, but sometimes I skip breakfast. And if I fast for 16 hours, generally that's important. Okay, interesting. I have 70% organic plant foods. That's correct. 30% organic grass-fed animal products. Sometimes this is exactly true. Sometimes I'm more plant-based. Sometimes I'm more carnivore leaning. That's true. Like sometimes I know what my body wants. Sometimes my body wants to eat a more vegetarian meal. Other times I want to eat a more carnivore-like meal. Let's see. High diversity. Avoid repeating the same foods. It's really, really important. Sometimes when IBDers especially find a food that is working for them, they just eat the same thing over and over and over. I really want to advise you usually against that. Sometimes you'll have a safe food. Like, for example, I have a client that just like bananas are his magic food. Like if he's experiencing some sort of abdominal discomfort or some symptoms, if he turns to a banana, really, really helps. And, fun fact is that polyphenols and flavonoids and anthocyanins found in dark berries and fruits, there's an enzyme in bananas that actually breaks them down before they can actually get into and interact with the immune system. So if you're going to eat bananas, don't put them in your blueberry smoothie. Generally eat them 2 hours apart from if you're going to be eating flavonoid rich foods. Okay. Food is not inherently good or bad. We explore. Food is medicine. Prioritize anti-inflammatory benefits, polyphenols and flavonoids, fermented prebiotic foods. Stimulate butyrate producing bacteria. We'll go through that in a sec. And here are my dietary inspirations: IBD-8, SCD, paleo, plant-based, ketogenic, Mediterranean. I would also just put carnivore here. Let's see. Generally 2 meals per day, 8:30 and 3 p.m. Yep, that's exactly what I still do. And I eat out at restaurants sometimes. 90% of my meals are at home. I'd say, and I used to have a personal chef. I don't have one right now. It was really cool. Got a little expensive. I would say about 80% of my meals are at home right now. Oh my God, this is so important. Chew your food really well. If you are in an active flare with IBD, I want you to chew that food like your life depended on it, or blend it up or cook it. Okay, you want to pretend that you are like an infant. Would you give your 1-year-old raw carrots? No, you would not. You would cook them. You would mush them up. And avoid cooking with too many oils. This is something that's new. A new sort of strategy is that the more you can cook with water, the better. The more you can cook with water, the better. Okay, we're not going to go through all of this here, but this is my active flare, foundational domain, stability domain, exploratory domain. Some of this has changed a little bit. I would say I really want to tolerate lentil pasta, but I have not been tolerating it as much as I want. And again, you guys are going to be able to develop what works for you and what doesn't. You know, don't just blatantly copy me. We have to go through a process together. You have to go through a process to see what's working and what's not. And for those of you who are overachievers, you can go through all of the different food groups right here, when you're going to eat them, how you're going to prepare them. And this will work for some of you who are really detail oriented and others who just want to, have a more simple look at this. Okay, I want to see, do I have any other? Yeah, so again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to show you that I've put a lot of thought into what I eat and how I eat. And I don't need to update this religiously here because my friends, I've done it once and it allowed me to get in touch with my own body. And, I would say 75% of the time I could literally stick a food in my mouth and just kind of know like, nope, that's not going to do it. And I would just especially if you get that like no feeling and you're not enjoying the food, like do not eat it. And do not go out there and explore on foods that you are not enjoying. Do not do that. Like, don't do it for social pressure or any of that. Don't eat things that you're not enjoying. Okay, that's one thing. If you're going to go explore and you know that there's going to be some consequences and it's going to bring you immense happiness, then that's fantastic. Okay, but do not eat foods that you know are not on your diet that are causing you distress. These are some of the foods I cook. Again, I probably don't eat oat waffles anymore too often, but they were delicious. I'd probably skip the corn tortillas these days. Kelp noodles would probably be fine for me. These squash noodles would also be fine. Now I want you to keep in mind, this is my stability domain. I would not be eating quite like this if I was in an active flare. Okay, so now we're going to look at some studies that have come out with diet and IBD. This is a very landmark study, an infamous study. One of our nutritional advisors, our science advisors, Dr. Ali, has some big problems with it. It's a randomized controlled trial comparing the specific carbohydrate diet, SCD, to a Mediterranean diet in adults. Their finding was that there's no difference between SCD and Mediterranean. So there were many criticisms of this study design. I don't have time to go into like all of what those were here. And Dr. Ali argues that if the study was designed slightly differently, that we would probably see a better result for SCD. I think it also, that could be true. And I do agree with that. And I do follow, and if I just went on a Mediterranean straight diet rather than my essentially modified SCD diet, which includes red meat, which includes, me not eating certain starches and sugars, at certain times, I don't think it would be as effective as a Mediterranean diet. And what I think is that there are a subset of patients with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis that SCD will just work so much better for than a Mediterranean diet. And there's also a subset of people with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis that where a Mediterranean diet will actually be better. And that is in part just because it's easier to follow for sure. But I do think that the Mediterranean diet, especially in Crohn's disease, discludes important things, especially potentially like red meat. I think red meat is more of an issue in ulcerative colitis, and that seems to be demonstrated in the literature. And it also seems to be what I have seen. But then again, I have plenty of members of Systema IBD who eat red meat, who have UC, who are thriving. I want to show you guys another important resource. This is called Nutrition in Immune Balance. This is put out by a physician from, I believe, Seattle Children's. This is a more SCD-centric site, and it also just has an incredible amount of resources. I think it's very, very good. It has stuff on EEN, and I would highly recommend checking out this site as well. And again, on this site, this is a nice place to find what's legal and not legal in SCD. I just have a big problem with that language of legal and illegal. It's too strong of language, in my opinion. And there are days where certain things are going to be, quote, legal for you. There's times of the day that certain things are. So this is just, an important resource. Like you're like, oh, why is agave illegal? Why is agave illegal? Well, it's actually because it contains probably more sucrose than single monosaccharides, and like something like honey, which is very heavy in both glucose and fructose, which are monosaccharides rather than disaccharides. Yeah, so again, if I eat too many almonds, it says right here, frequent nut consumption is associated with healthy profile inflammatory biomarkers. That's not true for me, specifically. So if I eat too many almonds, I do not do well. I can do a little bit of them, but not too many. So remember, each of us is individual and different. Now I want to show you guys what happens when you search for diet and inflammatory bowel disease on Google. So we get the AI answers. We got Mediterranean, low FODMAP, low residue, gluten-free. I have found very few people to just thrive on a low FODMAP diet in IBD. I think there's very little evidence for it. But again, especially for those of you who have both IBD and IBS, and that might be as common as, that comorbidity right there might be as much as 30 to 40%. There are periods where a low FODMAP could be important here. Now, the first hit is from UCSF, and I love UCSF a lot. They, in many ways, in the most acute parts of my Crohn's disease, they saved my life. But this article on diet, they're just not quite up to date on all of the stuff in here. Suggestions for first foods after flare, diluted juices. Okay, maybe. Applesauce. Okay. Canned fruit. I would say, whole fruits that are mushed up would probably be better. Oatmeal, again, if you're sensitive to carbs, starches, I think that could be a problem. And they even have bread, sourdough right on here. I think this might be just somewhat problematic. This idea, and a lot of doctors still recommend a low residue diet. I'd be very cautious with a low residue diet. There are ways to get fiber even when you are in an active flare. So anyway, I believe that they will probably update this soon. We also have Mayo Clinic here. Again, Mayo Clinic I interviewed there when I was applying to medical school, one of the most incredible institutions. I love Mayo Clinic. They are so kind, so amazing. What do they recommend? Low fiber. I mean, fiber is so important in inflammatory bowel disease, and I'll show you why in a second. Try low FODMAP. Again, I think there's very little evidence for that. Drink water. Okay. Avoid caffeine and energy drinks. There's not much here. Let me go through why fiber real quick is really important in this. If I just scroll down in my micro course here, and we get to how prebiotic fiber, the power of prebiotics, how prebiotic fiber nourishes the microbiome. So when you eat prebiotic fiber, okay, when you get these things from fruits, avocados and blueberries, even onions and mushrooms, that nourishes the microbiome, and that feeds specific bacteria in the microbiome. And those bacteria ferment those fibers into short chain fatty acids. Okay, and those short chain fatty acids then nourish the barrier, and they help to make sure that the gut is less leaky. And colonocytes eat butyrate, which is the main short chain fatty acid. And that's the main reason why prebiotics are really important in IBD. Even if you're in an active flare, you just need to blend them up. Like seriously, I would not eat, raw citrus. I wouldn't be eating like blackberries with all sorts of seeds in there. I'd blend up those things. But that's why it is really important to get fiber, and this idea that all IBD patients should just eat like donuts and bread and pasta and all of this is a highly outdated concept. Okay, so I want to show you this review paper that was put out very recently by the American Gastroenterology Association. I'm going to give them a big applause for just putting this out there because progress is progress. Is it a perfect article? No, it's far from perfect. There's lots of issues with it here. But the fact that they're putting this much time into diet is really amazing. Is there any mention of SCD in this paper? No, there's not. They don't even mention it. Is there mention of IBD aid? Is there mention of this idea of a non-dogmatic strategy? No. So they have a ways to go, in my opinion, but this is an important first step. There's some best practice advice. There's, 12 of them. I'm going to go through the first 4. And I'm going to mildly disagree with some of it, but also, again, give them applause for putting it out there. Best practice advice, unless there's a contraindication, all patients with IBD should be advised to follow a Mediterranean diet. No. Just no. That is reductionistic, okay? If I followed a Mediterranean diet, I would not be doing as well as I am right now. And I know that. I am on Andrew's diet. And actually what we should be advocating is we should build the systems in place, which Systema is doing in order to help patients find the diet that works for them. Maybe once we go through that process, a certain percentage of IBD patients will do well on a Mediterranean diet, but I don't think all of them. The part I like is rich in a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, monounsaturated fats, complex carbohydrates, and lean proteins, and low and ultra-processed foods. I generally agree with the lean proteins. I think, I don't think fat is animal fat's the absolute enemy. Patients in IBD who have symptomatic intestinal strictures, I do have a stricture. It's doing pretty good. Should avoid fibrous plant-based foods. I totally agree with that. EEN, exclusive enteral nutrition, which we'll go through in a second. Nutrition formulates is an effective therapy for induction of clinical remission, endoscopic response in Crohn's disease. I think this is an amazing option, and we're going to go through a reverse engineered EEN and a study that was done on it. And I'm going to show that to you guys. I think you guys could create your own EEN, and that's something that we can do, that we can help you with at Systema. The Crohn's disease exclusion diet, which again was listed on NT for IBD, in that that is a type of partial enteral nutrition therapy that's in the first phase of it that may be effective for induction of clinical remission and endoscopic response in mild to moderate Crohn's disease. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is such an amazing first step. And I applaud the AGA for just putting out this comprehensive of a review paper on it, and something that is advocating for whole real foods. So let's give them a round of applause. And you know what? I think we'll see something even better in their next review paper. So, especially in Europe and other countries, a frontline treatment, especially in pediatric Crohn's disease, is called EEN, or exclusive enteral nutrition. The problem with most formulations is that they're full of crap, and that they're full of things that even have evidence that are contraindicated in Crohn's disease. Now, this study that I believe is out of Seattle Children's did a much better job, and they reverse engineered this smoothie. And let's just go through the results, or we'll go 10 participants were enrolled with a median age of 14.5 years. 8 completed the trial. Wonder why so many. It's a small study here. A whole food, so the conclusion was that a whole food blended smoothie was effective for inducing clinical remission and decreasing fecal calprotectin in pediatric Crohn's disease, similar to commercial EEN formulas. Further research may give insight into data-driven whole food dietary approaches for Crohn's disease management. Here is the full text of this. I spent a bunch of time being like, okay, what was in the smoothie? What was in the smoothie? It's really hard to find, but if you go down here and then you click on this supplemental material, which here it is, it's hidden. It's like, what's the most important thing of this? It's like, what's in the smoothie, guys? That's the most important thing. Like, what did you give? Here's what's in the smoothie. Here's what they did. Ripe bananas, egg whites, water, avocado oil, strawberries, plain Greek yogurt, almond butter, honey. Not terrible. Would I change a couple things? Yeah, I'd change a couple things in here. I'd probably reduce, I don't know about almond butter for everyone in there. I think instead of avocado oil, I think avocado oil is a pretty good choice. I'd probably use ghee. That's just me. I think the egg whites are a good idea. I think a ripe banana, that's fine. Right there. I mean, I would personally, if I was going to conduct this study, I would make the smoothies I would make different smoothies at different times of the day. I would make it a little bit more diverse in what people were getting. But again, that's a lot of different variables that would be introduced, and that might, mess with that'd be a lot to control for. And that's not how science is done. But science in its own way is a little reductionistic. All right, guys, so that's our video for today. Thank you so much for hanging with me there through all the things we went through in diet for inflammatory bowel disease. And whether you have IBD, or whether it's a friend or a loved one, or even if you have IBS or a different chronic health condition, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I want to drill in just a couple of points. Again, the first is that there's no one diet for IBD. Okay, that's really, really important. The second thing is there's obviously just total no foods that are not even foods. These are things like binders and additives and artificial ingredients. You want to eat as much whole foods as possible. Again, you need to go through a process to see what's working for you and what's not. And we, have that available in Systema IBD, Systema Core. If you have IBD, you should be in Systema IBD with me. I'd love to work with you and help you develop this diet and to demystify all that's going on. Again, remember to also be loving and easy on yourself. Certain foods, we know that Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is a condition of the microbiome. And the food that most readily alters the microbiome, complex carbohydrates, things like starches and fibers. And even, something I didn't even mention in this video, we talked about polyphenols and flavonoids and anthocyanins and these types of things. Those are actually prebiotic as well. And those are the one non-carbohydrate food that does alter the microbiome. So listen, I'd love for you. You can check out the description. We can coach together one-on-one. You can enroll in Systema IBD. I'd love to work with you. If you are struggling right now, if you are in the worst flare of your life, I just want to tell you that there is hope for this. I've worked with hundreds of IBD patients. I am non-dogmatic. I believe in medications when needed. I believe in what you believe in and what you want. If your goal is to come off medications and just use diet and supplements and herbs, that's my goal too. If you want to use medications, I'm highly educated on how all these different medications work. I work with gastroenterologists. If you are a health professional, if you are a GI doctor, I want to be your partner in this. I don't have one agenda. I don't believe there's one right way to go about this. I think there are many different answers. I think the number one thing that I believe is that you should encourage your patients to develop their own dietary strategies and see what works for them. And I'm happy to assist you and help that. And if you are an IBD patient, I just remember, listen to yourself. Okay. You are an amazing sensor that your body is trying to tell you. And if you are having trouble, deciphering that signal and between which food is bothering you and which one is not, that's totally normal. It takes time. This is an exercise that, that I am still learning even after, 10 plus years of being in remission. So thank you for tuning in again. This has been this video. I hope it's been helpful to you. Again, you can schedule below with me. I'd love to talk to you. I'll only give you an offer of admission to be part of our program if I absolutely know we're going to be able to help you. And I hope you have a wonderful day or evening. Sending lots of love and healing to you.